There's one other approach that we can use to talk about bigger intervals, or at least intervals that are larger than 1 octave. We said that we could talk about compound intervals. Let's write it here, compound intervals, which was simply a smaller interval that we already know, like say a perfect fifth. And the fact that it's a compound interval just means it's a perfect fifth plus an octave. So here's our C, a perfect fifth plus an octave will be, well, here's the perfect fifth, here's the C to the G, plus an octave again takes us up here. And this would give us our compound perfect fifth. Another approach we can use to these bigger intervals is just to continue the naming system that we've already been using, and just continuing the size of the numbers as we get bigger and bigger intervals. We said this was an example of a second between C and D, this was a third, this was a fourth up to F, this was a fifth to G, this was a sixth to E, this was a seventh going up to B, and then we got to an octave, which indicates like octopus and octagon, 8 steps, 8 letter names between C and C. And if we carry on this idea and we go one more step to a D, so we've gone from a C to a D an octave above, just put a line over there to indicate it's an octave above, then what we have is a compound major second, because it is an octave plus a major second. But it's also a major ninth. So we've just continued that naming system. We've got as far as 8 with our octave, and we've gone one more step. So that gives us a major ninth. It sounds a bit like this. Play them both together. Sounds like that. Quite spaced apart, a good amount of gap. Normally we fill in that interval with other notes. this is really common in harmonies in chords, which we'll have a listen to in a moment. And just the same way we could have a major and minor second, we can also have, so we could have a compound minor second, which would be an octave plus a minor second, or we could have a minor ninth. And no prizes for guessing what we would do to our major ninth to make a minor ninth. We just make it one semitone smaller. And that gives us our minor ninth. One really common use of this ninth interval is in a special type of chord that we call a ninth chord. And the reason it's called a ninth chord is it contains this interval, the interval of a major ninth. And we can build one of these chords just by knowing which scale degrees we need to include. In fact, a ninth chord is really an extension of a seventh chord. Elsewhere I've taught you how to build a dominant seventh chord that we might use in lots of rock music and jazz music and pop music. It's a very common chord that we use in lots of different styles of music. But the essential ingredients of a seventh chord are taking the scale in question. Here we're dealing with G. We take the first, the third, the fifth, the flattened seventh. So in this case, that's going to be an F natural, because normally in the scale of G we would expect an F sharp, so we've gone one semitone down. And in this case we're going to add a ninth, which changes this chord from being a seventh chord, which would sound like this, to being a ninth chord, which sounds like this. Now to me that chord sounds much more rich and interesting than just purely the triad on its own, and that's because we've added these other ingredients to our pot, if you like. We started with the triad of G, B and D, but we've added an F and an A. And those give us some extra richness and some extra colour that we can use to our advantage when we're writing music. As we go and look at some other of these larger intervals, we can add those to chords too and really extend our palette, if you like, of harmonic colours.